Greetings, welcome to episode 6. And today we have a very established guest from all the way from Bhutan for the sixth episode. And we have Dr. Sonam Chuki. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, a brief information and description background of Dr. Sonam Chuki. She's an academic from Bhutan specializing in the discourse of gender and politics. So after attaining a doctorate degree in Australia at Queensland University of Technology, she's currently working and has worked in the Royal Education Council and the Royal Institute of Management in Bhutan. So today we will be discussing on the topic on the gender and role of women in Bhutanese culture. Dr. Chuki, welcome.
Thank you very much, Joshua.
So, first of all, what can you share with us about your background? I've only illustrated just a glimpse of your background. Would you like to share with us a bit more of how you got into your PhD program?
Sure. First of all, thank you. Kuzuzongpo. Kuzuzongpo is a greeting in Dzongkha. It means auspicious body and mind. From the Eastern Himalayas, and thank you for inviting me to this wonderful talk show. Women's empowerment of really in the sense of uplifting the weaker sex, uplifting and advancement of women in all spheres of life. It's very close to my heart because, first of all, I'm a woman. Secondly, I'm a woman from a very humble background. Most importantly, some of the important people in my life who've made an impact in my life, including my mother, they've been my source of inspiration and role model. So this is why women's empowerment and gender equality. And also, if you look at today's world order, if the world was much fairer and equal, I think we wouldn't have issues related to right from big global issues like climate change, climate crisis, the current pandemic crisis, poverty, inequality, human hardship. I think it'd be much a better place to live. This is why if you look at sustainable development goal also, one of the goals is gender equality still. So the world needs to do a lot more beyond rhetoric. Thank you.
Yes. Welcome, and we are looking forward to hear some of your specialized expertise in this genre.
Mm-hmm.
So you've mentioned sustainable development here, which is actually one of the core ideals of the Bhutanese policy. Would you like to share with us a bit more about maybe some rough history of the role of women traditionally in Bhutanese context?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Like any other South Asian country, if you look at Bhutan's context also, first of all, we're very fortunate compared to other 7 countries in South Asia, where patriarchy is still very alive and kicking, and South Asia has been very unkind to women. But if you look at Bhutan, we don't have explicit gender inequality such as the ones in Pakistan or Afghanistan or some parts of India. However, we cannot rest on our laurels and see that all is well here in the Himalayas. We also have our own socio-cultural barrier, which is deeply seated in our stereotypes, which again is rooted in patriarchy, patriarchal notions, ideas, stereotypes, beliefs are very much still alive here. And this is why if you look at traditional society, men were seen as breadwinners or bread earners and women as receivers or recipient. So there's this public gendered division of labor or gendered divide. Women occupied women's status and women's roles rested only in private space, so to speak. And women participated in education and in development sector much later than men. Of course, Bhutan opened up to the outside world only in early 60s. Till 1950s, we were under what you call as a splendid policy of isolation. The World Wars, first and second, The Korean War, so to speak, never touched Bhutan, although neighboring Tibet, then independent Tibet, had their own invasion, very harsh experience. But we were very lucky. We were never colonized by any foreign power or invasion by any foreign power. So there was this Himalayas. Beyond Himalayas, you could never see outside world. But in 1960s, when we opened up, when education sector opened up, in the name of, girls being sexually vulnerable, and also in the harsh mountainous terrain, it was very difficult for girl child to walk to the nearest school, which was very far. And most of these children were born in 50s, in 60s. They were by then they were the school going age. They were educated in neighboring districts of Darjeeling, Kalimpong, in West Bengal of district of India. So as a result, girls couldn't avail education, access education. This is why it impacted their public status and role in public domain. It took on to really a typical traditional role of childbearing, rearing, and family participation. However, having said that, because we are supposed to be vulnerable culturally, so when it came to the share of ownership of property, ownership of land, girls in especially in northern Bhutan, some parts of eastern Bhutan and western Bhutan generally inherited, so that parents could protect the girl child. So it was partly also matrilineal society to that extent. However, if you look at southern Bhutan, which is predominantly Hindu society, it was patrilocal. So girls didn't inherit much property as boys did. There was also son preference, and girls were married off, and of course sent off to the in-laws, the husbands' homes. This as a society, it's a very tiny little country, but we have such rich culture, based predominantly Buddhist culture as a Buddhist kingdom, but also we have Hindu culture. So that impacted on the traditional definition of traditional roles and regulations. Because if you look at culture, that is the root, right? In the gender tree, for example, the analogy of a tree, you have in the roots you have this culture, you have religious beliefs which govern your culture and tradition. And culture and tradition is like a trunk that really give to branches in terms of your status, your roles, your image in the society. And then it came in the form of a fruit, which is whether you were a fruit that even if you had potential, whether you could quench thirst and hunger of somebody else. So women could really showcase your potentiality based on your root. So that's the society. But we have come a long way. So today we have been progressive in terms of today is 2020. So this is our 12th development plan. So in the 12th development plan, there are women who are working in the public service, though a small percentage, still there are women at the leadership level, at the professional level, at the support level. In the private sector, we have also a couple of well-established women entrepreneurs. In the civil society, we have also women leaders, women managing directors, and women patrons, including the Queens of Bhutan, who have been very inspired in the civil society sector of touching the lives that the state could touch in terms of poverty alleviation, youth development, women's empowerment, environmental preservation, cultural preservation, the support to the nuns, you name it, all in all the sectors. And also in the higher education, our university is very young, formed only in 2004. So we have two universities, the Royal University of Bhutan, which caters to liberal arts, to Buddhist studies, to natural resources studies, to science and technology, and to management studies and business studies. We have recently University of Medical Sciences, catering largely to School of Public Health, School of Medical Sciences. So here you also have a couple of countable women deans and academic leaders, but largely still a male-dominated society because of the reason that I just shared earlier on. So it's not bad, but we cannot rest on our laurels. We also have to move and be progressive, because if you look, this is a predominantly Buddhist country. if you look at the sutras and shastras, even Abhidharma, the Buddha never discriminated women and men. In fact, Buddha actually had a phrase which is in Chuki, classical Tibetan, which is also a text here in Bhutan. It says Riki Buddham Riki Bumo, which means son of a noble household, daughter of a noble household. So no discrimination. And it's just the human construction down the line in a patriarchal society. You also had how the men looked at the world. So it's largely from that perspective. So women were excluded and they couldn't air their voice. As a result, the social cultural construction, evolved like that. Though it's changing, social changes are very slow. It takes time, but it's happening, but it's not yet there, so we should it's still evolving. So this is why the state also emphasizes on gender equality in terms of equal opportunity to both men and women, both boys and girls. It's just that sometimes in the name of gender neutrality, to respect both the gender, the girls are left out. So just to address advanced fast-paced development is also important in my view to also have what you call as positive discrimination. So you allow this girl child who's not able to advance in higher education. For example, in science and technology, you also have very few women engineers, scientists participating. And even in leadership roles, you have very few women. So it's important to have positive discrimination. So these women are given extra opportunities. So the level playing field is equalized. And same thing in politics. You have in our Parliament of National Council and National Assembly, in both the houses, it's male dominated. We only have countable number of women parliamentarians. So yeah, we are not yet there. So that is the little background, the context that I like to present.
Well, thank you for that mini discourse, Dr. Chuki. And it's a rare privilege we get, for a representative as yourself, coming all the way from the Himalayas and adding to this bonus of being from the Himalayas, having different perspectives, not colonized, from a very different upbringing, different social setting, environment, and also representing women and the role of women within society and having more progressive solutions of how certain problems can be mitigated or overcome or solved. So it ties in with my next question. Also, from an outsider's perspective, I notice women tend to marry really young in culture like or within society of Bhutan. Would you like to explain more about how this has come about and some of the solutions maybe you're proposing as well?
Sure. As I was, I'd like to reiterate what I just shared about the gender division, which is largely from a traditional society. If you look at, it's like, if you go back to human history, not just Bhutan, it's the issue really right back to hunter-gatherer society. So in hunter-gatherer society, you have men who are hunting, right? And women basically left to the caves, to the dwellings, a migratory character where they would just be responsible only for childbearing and rearing roles, and at the most collecting berries, right? So very related to your manual physical labor, what you can offer. Now, when the society evolved from hunter-gatherer to a settled civilized society such as the Egyptian civilization, the Chinese civilization, the Mohenjo-daro and Harappan civilization, of course, Buddhist civilization very much in India and in China, of course in Tibet, and here in Bhutan too. So when settlement came in, it became again that model was sort of replicated in terms of really in the private domain, in the private realm, women could play more role. So as a result, then the marriage became very important theme of the society. Now, if you look at Indian subcontinent today, I think even in the 21st century, you have booming IT technology supported websites on what you call a shadi.com. The online dating, love and intimacy, the online websites, including the scammers, scamming on women who are seen as potential brides and, of course, to exploit as well. So this is why, again, marriage at young age. So here in Bhutan, in a very agrarian society, agriculture is still very important sector today, contributing to our GDP and to the employment. About 69% of our 700,000 population still employed in agriculture sector, where farm labor is very important. So here, children are very important because children are not just unproductive consumers; they are also productive farm labor. So this is why in 60s, 70s, 80s, oh, you name it, families as put on an average a size is like 6, 7 children. Some mothers without even maternal health care system in place, they had children like a mother bearing 10 children, 11 children. It's crazy. But then that was the call of the day. But with modern healthcare system and modern education in place and state advocacy on maternal health, so now today, educated women, education has impacted a lot on women, and they actually, on an average, you can say at least 2 children or 3 children at the most, and some are single. There are a lot of trend of rising with young people who are becoming single, so no children. But then if you look at also the herding society in northeastern Bhutan or northwestern Bhutan, in the herding community, the herding society dictates the lifestyle, the environment there, both social and physical environment. So girls tend to drop out of school, leave school at very young age and marry as young as 15 years, 16 years, despite state advocacy of educating girls. At least our constitution requires that the minimum education be class 10 level. Class 10 is where you say, like American system, grade 10 level education. So, yeah, so it is changing, but then the old system is still in some place because of lack of exposure, lack of understanding of women's empowerment in through education. For me, education is the social pill for both short-term and long-term empowerment of women.
Thank you once again. And I would like to also expand on this a bit more in regards
Yeah,
to the current situation where you're in.
yeah,
What is the status of groups in terms of gender equality, woman empowerment,
yeah.
feminism? How is that coming along in Bhutan?
Sure. Now now, as I was saying earlier, it's progressive in terms of the state support. State is very important in Bhutan because since 1960s till now, it is state-led development. It is unlike in major market economies, it's not market-based economy. uh, we are a mixed economy where state plays a key role and also allows market to play their own role. So in the economy, we have both private ownership and state ownership of properties, of businesses, of companies. And then we also allowed civil society to contribute in the areas where state could not reach or market could not reach. So, since 2004, the state established the National Commission for Women and Children with a strong mandate to really empower women, to protect women, to also protect children. So, for example, our legislation also supports, advanced by the National Commission for Women and Children, we also had the Child Protection Act because ever since Bhutan exposed ourselves to the outside world, when we opened up to the outside world in the form of permission to allow internet and television to come to the country, of course, young people, both men and women, are increasing exposed to globalized commercial globalization, which sometimes has negative impact on a very traditional society that we are. So here, then children again. child protection is very important. You could also, young people could be exposed online to pedophiles. Also in the country, I mean, even if it's this is a gross national happiness country, a Dharma kingdom, but you also have rapists, pedophiles, so we had to protect our children. Some parents were also irresponsible, so we had to look after these children who are left out. Then women, because domestic violence, despite being a Dharma country and despite our own progressive involvement, we also have a high rising cases of domestic violence, both urban space and rural area. During the pandemic, there was a high rise of women, especially from low income groups, especially from working class, who experience domestic violence at home. So this agency, National Commission for Women and Children, is responsible to liaise with other state agencies, to liaise with police, to liaise with another non-governmental organization called Nurture, Renew, Nurture, Protect, and Empower Women, a very progressive NGO. So work together with that, and academic like ourselves, sorry, myself, who really passionate about women's protection, empowerment, and nurturing. So we work together to address these issues. So yeah, this is where the state is coming in very strongly to protect. And in the police, because if you look at police, police plays a key role. Whenever there's a crime, whenever, because as a keeper of law and order in the country, first thing people remember is to ring police. So police also has a toll-free line, and they also have women and children's protection section in every police community policing or police headquarter or police department in 20 districts of the country. So where these police, especially women officers or women constables, are responsible to reach out to the women who are seeking help. And the local NGO Renew that I was talking about also has a good number of what they call as friends of Renew, who supporting Renew to reach out to women who needed to be. And then also community volunteers in their respective community. Should there be domestic violence or crime in the house, how do these women reach out to the nearest community so that they're not on time, they're saved, right, from being killed? They're also, with due respect to you, Josh, they're also men. Perpetrators are mostly men who are very intimate partners, such as your boyfriend, your partner, your husband, your brother, your cousin, and your best friends. They're the ones who rape these young people, who inject so much pain on your once loved person. So Renew's got a shelter called Happy Home. It's a transition home for women in difficulty, who are threatened by their partners, who have no home, and who are economically and emotionally dependent on their partners. So till they're able to have their own home, they're given this home for both the children and themselves, and given special life skills training so that they become independent bread earners themselves. This is why education is so important. This education is a doorway to economic independence, and economic independence is critical to emotional independence, so to speak, to be self-realized human being. So this is why the non-state actors are trying to work together with state actors to address larger goal of women's empowerment. Truly, of course, living up to our development philosophy of gross national happiness.
Thank you. So you've mentioned a very interesting concept here in Bhutanese government politics
Yeah,
and policy and
yeah,
law, which maybe some of the viewers might not be very acquainted to.
yeah,
Most countries in the world seem to be valued based on the
yeah,
GDP, the gross domestic
mm,
product, based on
yeah.
profit or revenues on a monetary value basis. So, would you like to share with us your experience living and contributing in what Bhutan calls the gross national happiness, and how the benefits of this, which can actually be shared with other countries and other systems?
Sure. This is very close to my heart. So If this little country, as I was saying early on, we were never colonized or not invaded by any foreign power ever since our existence. So we're very grateful to our existence, despite being sandwiched geopolitically between two big giants in Asia, China in the north and India in the south. And you have this tiny little Bhutan in between, these two big neighbors. And we are landlocked. We're surrounded by the Indian states of Sikkim, the Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, Assam, and Arunachal Pradesh in our west, south, and eastern borders. So so this is why it's so important that we also had to also survive as a nation state. Very important, number one. Number two, also to tell the world that this little country can also contribute to international peace and security. You know, if you look at international world order, I think the human species has been the most harsh, the most cruel species, you know, worse than the animals. If you look at the First World War, the Second World War, the Holocaust, and the world in the name of religion, in the name of racial discrimination, we've killed a lot of people, millions disappeared. I think peace is so important, so precious, the word. This is why our fourth king of Bhutan, His Majesty Jigme Singye Wangchuk, he became a king at a very young age. I think when some of us are in the high school enjoying our adolescence, this young king came to throne as young as sweet 16. So when he was crowned, he said he would rather put his people's happiness before income. So this is where he prophesied that or advocated that gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. Even when he traveled abroad as far as 1979 in Havana in Cuba, when the journalists interviewed him about this little poor impoverished country materially, so he said he's not, he'll take on very slow with development. He doesn't want to compromise the environment, human happiness, and happiness of all beings with material good and growth. So he wanted to make sure that his people understood genuine happiness. Now, if you look at this, is very interesting. If you look at US, then this is 1972. In 1972, when our king, he wasn't at that time, he took over the reins. Sadly, because of his father's very unfortunate, our third king passed away at the age of 45, very young. So to take on his father's responsibility at a very young age, even before he was crowned in 1974. So in 1972, when our king spoke this, in America, Professor Easterling, economist, was researching on income versus happiness, and income and happiness, sorry. So Easterling found out that as people, the higher income did not give you genuine happiness. The more income you had, the more unhappy you are, you know. So then he called it Easterling paradox. So now, in the same, this is America, US, and Bhutan is still very far away in the Himalayas, tucked away in the Himalayas. And then our king, without even being exposing himself to this market economists in America, he prophesied, he had this big vision, grand vision, which is still relevant today, that genuine happiness doesn't come from material wealth. This is why if you look at some of the theories in economics, you have what you call as miserable millennials and happy peasants. You have millennials who are so miserable, who are suffering from depression, who have fast cars, big mansions, loads of money, loads of fast cars, you name it, still miserable, very sad at heart, still very aggressive. You have peasants who just have clothes on their back, 3 square meals a day, fresh drinking water, plenty of fresh air, yet very happy. So that's sort of a theory. So this is why gross national happiness is still very important, not just for Bhutan alone. I would say I would like to offer it to the world beyond Bhutan, for so that we live in harmony with nature, with culture, with fellow human beings. We are nature and nature is us. Because we could not live in harmony, almost 8 billion people with Mother Nature, This is why we have today incurable, scientifically, how much of advanced you are, scientists are taking time to produce vaccine. And we went to the moon. We had submarines. We have everything at the press of a button, at the call of a button. But a call of this invisible tiny little buck, the world is bent. The world came to stand still. This is why material happiness, I think, it doesn't really, it's not the coefficient for human happiness, really 100% coefficient. So in gross national happiness philosophy, since 1970s up till now, is still a developing philosophy. We are talking about a mandala of happiness, human happiness, in terms of work and life balance, in terms of ecological resilience, ecological literacy, in terms of education, in terms of balanced development, in terms of great time use, balanced time use, in terms of good governance, in terms of cultural resilience, human happiness. We have some 33 indicators. Every 2 years, we do a survey to guide ourselves and our policies, whether we are right there or not. For example, all the state policies go through what we call as gross national happiness policy protocol. So this policy screening. For example, there was this big idea of private mining in some places. So then you had this mining, whether the mining was feasible for the country or not, had to go through screening tool. If the stool doesn't allow, then of course the mining it doesn't become an economic activity. Even though in GDP terms it could contribute, right? And you also have a community who are assured that fresh air, fresh water, still very important. So their community in some parts of the country who are resisting to money is they still feel that environment is so important. And we are so blessed under the leadership of both the fourth king, who's been visionary, and the current king, His Majesty Jigme Sonam Chuki. We also have a constitution which actually has a benchmarks which actually protects our environment for 60% for future generation. This is why also laws are protected flora and fauna. We also have large parts of our country which are national parks, biodiversity corridors, rare species like the black-necked crane, for example, or snow leopard, which is shy and elusive Himalayan animals, are protected. And although we have human-wildlife conflict, there's some sort of a compensation paid to the people so that although the wildlife takes a toll on a farmland, somehow certain balance is maintained, though it's very hard and challenging many times. So we are not, it is not completely, I'm not saying everything is well. We have our challenges, but yet I feel this is still a beacon of light for the 21st century world order, which is increasingly becoming materialistic. Here in Bhutan too.
So sorry about that, technical difficulties, and we are still experiencing Mercury retrograde and also the post effects from the blue moon. We had a full moon yesterday on Halloween.
Here too, yeah, it's as I was saying yesterday, we also had full moon.
Yes. So what we were discussing about a very holistic vision, which just doesn't just deal with the material, but also with the emotional, the mental, the spiritual well-being. Not only within ourselves, but also with our surrounding environment. And yes, as you mentioned, it's still work in progress, I think, for Bhutan and the rest of the world, really, especially what we are undergoing right now with the pandemic and also with climate change along some other issues as well, many other issues. So I'd like to ask you a question related, tying back to the first part, the final two questions. So the first question will be tying back towards what we were discussing earlier about gender empowerment as well. So when we're talking here about male, men and women, male and female, what are your thoughts and advances in Bhutan, which you can share about the LGBT community?
Oh, okay, sure. Um, in a very traditional society, as I was saying earlier on, though if you look at, again, if you go back, this is a predominantly Buddhist country, more so the last Vajrayana Buddhist Kingdom in the world. Uh, if you look at Buddhist philosophy, the Buddhist texts, sutras, shastras, including what some of the great masters have taught, there's no discrimination actually between human beings, right? However, culturally, somehow the LGBT has always been lying in the periphery of the society. It's very sad because in their own family, they're being disowned by their own parents for who they are, for no fault of theirs. Again, as a Buddhist, because what are we, what, who are we is as a result of our past karma, and what you are going to become rests now, right? So the because of karmic consequences, that's who they are, and doesn't mean that they'll have to be disowned and stay in the periphery. However, in recent years, there's been increasingly advocacy for the LGBT people to be included in social development. Uh, Number one, because if you look at the now the life-threatening is current pandemic, but at that time, even now, it was HIV/AIDS. So there was the Ministry of Health and health professionals who have been working very hard to address these issues. Found out that there was this what you call as men transferring virus within men to men sex, the homosexuals. So they wanted to also make sure that it's curbed, and as a result, the LGBT people, well, human beings who've been affected by this, they got included, which was very good. Then in recent years, also some of the journalists been very compassionate, and they got some LGBT people who are willing to come on board, not under the cloak of anonymity, but reveal themselves and tell the stories, share the stories, the both challenges and opportunities that they're looking for on national television, the Bhutan Broadcasting Service. So at least a couple of them were very, very courageous, and for the first time they came on television and they shared the stories. And then, of course, people were touched, and that they came on board. And next bit, some of the non-governmental organizations such as Women's Empowerment Organization, former HIV/AIDS patient who are trying to address this problem to their own NGO, they included them. Some educators, because in schools system also you have LGBT children who are trying to also attend school and who experience challenges. The Ministry of Education, along with Department of School Education and some teachers, families who are really supportive of these children, they also try to include them. And the culminating part of it is very good, progressive one in my view, the current government. Actually, in the last parliament session, they tried to amend the penal code of Bhutan, which is very progressive. I would say one of the watershed in the legal, how do I say, equal legal laws for everybody. Because if you look at Penal Code of Bhutan, 2004, rape was defined as a man raping a woman. So LGBT rape, if they experience rape within themselves, homosexuals, I think they can't even seek help because sex is defined as a heterosexual activity is defined as legally approved sex, and homosex is still defined as unnatural sex. So this is why then if the penal code is amended this now, the National Assembly, I think they moved the bill. The current finance minister, who also has health professional background, actually had a key role to play. He advocated strongly on that, backed up by other parliamentarians. If the National Council agrees, and if there's endorsement by His Majesty the King, who is one of the entities of the Parliament of Bhutan, then I think we are progressive in terms of truly including them in legal terms also. Otherwise, in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, which is completely free, we don't pay for education. Right from zero to university, education is for free if you are motivated, if you have brains to study, and if you are committed. However, private schools are also available if your parents want alternative schooling, though the curriculum is same. The teachers undergo same training in teacher colleges. If you want a little better infrastructure or I don't know, better resources, the parents who are also availing private schooling. And university, because we have just two limited universities, and if kids cannot be accommodated here in Bhutan, majority of them seek overseas. So the LGBT children also, on the same line, along with the same line, they avail these services, but we are not yet completely there. I think we still need to walk or talk of what we're trying to do, and more so as a Dharma country, as I was saying, and also as a country of gross national happiness, where everybody is included, men, women, LGBT, special child, differently able children, everybody, so that the society is progressive. In my view, I feel it's so important to include everybody so that everybody becomes productive and contributing, proactive citizens of the country. The moment you try to exclude because of the social cultural construction or law or systems and policies, then we are creating our own subnationals in our own context and country, which I think as a human being, if you want to be a humankind with progression, I think this is wrong. Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering that question. Heated, this discussion in many parts of the
Mm,
world. You know,
sure.
and I agree with you. There has to be discussions, dialogues. And not only just the talk, but as you mentioned, implementations from the legal authorities, and these groups and communities also having the means, having the channels to voice out, to express the experiences as well. So very important to have this dialogue, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama always mentions, right? When there's ever
Yeah.
certain conflicts, always to resolve, not with violence or harsh penalties, but with
Yeah.
dialogue first.
Yeah. Sure.
And
Sure. Sure.
from the outside, I have whenever I got to know about Bhutan, there were certain impressions. So some of the things which came about to me was, yes, it's a country which is not easy for tourists to come into. I mean, there's a high cost for that. I mean, you can, but there is a high cost for that, and also that it's carbon negative, which speaks a lot about the biodiversity and the environmental reach within
Yeah.
Bhutan as well.
Yeah.
And what strikes me the most is, of this Himalayan kingdom as well, is the last remaining Vajrayana kingdom in the world. After the Chinese occupied Tibet in the 1959, when His Holiness seek refuge in India, then we have Bhutan, which is the last Vajrayana Buddhist Himalayan kingdom in the world. So, what to wrap up this interview discussion? How would you share about the knowledge and the wealth of wisdom and
Yeah.
compassion Bhutan has, which can be shared across the world?
Sure. Thank you very much. This is a very important question for our viewers who are viewing this discussion, and also especially the international community across the world, uh, to really look at this issue. Because if you look at, as you rightly said, Josh, if you look at some of the ancient Buddhist kingdoms of Ladakh, Sikkim, Tibet, some parts of Arunachal Pradesh, they all retreated, sucked in, yeah, uh, sucked in because of the global forces. Again, uh, Human beings, I think all of us, including the invaders, we have Buddha nature. But however, because of our upbringing, our schooling, our environment, our policies, we have become colonizers and invaders. As a result, we're losing this peaceful, how do I say, ancient heritage. So Bhutan, therefore, then it's a beacon of light to really preserve and promote for the sake of world, for the sake of future generation. And as you were saying, as the last country, Vajrayana Buddhist Kingdom, who are not only advocating dharma-based policies such as gross national happiness. If you look at dharma, what Buddha taught is, Buddha said, cultivate as much virtuous deeds as you can, avoid as much non-virtuous as deeds you can, and tame this mind of ours is my teaching. So if you look at Bhutan, our policies are very much talking about cultivating as many virtuous deeds as we can in terms of our policy support, our development philosophy, in terms of maintaining, environment preserving and promoting, so that at least Bhutan, we can contribute to reducing, depleting ozone layers, contributing more oxygen, supply oxygen to the world, contributing, keeping the rare species in harmony with each other, so that the unborn scientists, the potential scientists, the potential philosophers could still work on that and contribute to harmonious living of this almost 8 billion people around the world. Um, and it's also a model as a last Vajrayana Buddhist Kingdom as what we have lost in Afghanistan. Afghanistan used to be ancient Buddhist kingdom. Gandhara Buddhist civilization was flourishing in ancient Afghanistan, ancient Indonesia, ancient Cambodia, and Vietnam. You see, ancient Sri Lanka, so to speak. So important that at least we go back to ancient wisdom, so that ancient wisdom still gives not only inspiration but also practical tips to really, in view of my root teacher, His Eminence Zosjame Khyentse Rinpoche, to be wisely greedy, not stupidly greedy. I think we are all greedy. We cannot say we are not greedy. Everybody, including us Bhutanese, But let us be wisely greedy. Let us not kill the golden goose, the Mother Earth, with one single sword. But let us also make sure that we nurture this golden goose so that she lays golden eggs in the form of fresh water, fresh air, uh, unpolluted, clean soil to grow our food, and we survive with the fellow beings, which is animals and plant. Otherwise, we will kill ourselves. Today is Corona 19, COVID 19. Come COVID 2021, we'll have to survive so that our future generation can move on. And as the last Vajrayana Buddhist Kingdom, this is what we can offer. This is why it's so important also to preserve not just the culture, heritage, and identity and language of Bhutan, but also our own independence, sovereignty, so we can contribute to the world peace, world harmony, which is much needed. And I was saying earlier, Josh, we need songwriters, peacemakers, musicians, healers of all sorts, rather than greedy politicians. Uh, Politicians who have greedy ambition and not honest ambitions to kill the world. This is what we pray for, much compassion. So from the eastern Himalayas, from the kingdom of Bhutan, this is what I can offer. So to say that may all sentient beings be well, may all sentient beings have the causes of happiness, may all sentient beings be reduced of sorrows, of all sorts of pains and suffering, and rest in great equanimity, so that we see our own awakened nature, the Buddha nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sonam Chuki. Very profound to wrap up with the wisdom teachings and the importance of carrying on the legacy of living wisely, living more compassionately. And I think today we've covered so many areas, in a structured way, from gender politics and, the Tibetan Buddhist Kingdom of Bhutan, the Vajrayana Buddhist Kingdom of Bhutan. So, thank you once again for your time, your compassion, your wisdom, sharing with us your insights. And yes, just to wrap up, there'll be more shows like this in the coming weeks, so you can subscribe to the channel. Links will be included on the Facebook. And I look forward to speaking to you again, Dr. Sonam Chuki, and to all the viewers, wishing you happiness, causes of happiness, wishing you to overcome suffering and never separated from the state of bliss, and to always strive for equanimity, balance in your life, not to have too much attachment and not too much aversion. So thank you again, and have a great Halloween weekend. Have a great weekend of the full moon. Have a great weekend, whether you're a believer or non-believer, and rest in happiness. Thank you.
Thank you very much.